Did I do it? Did I turn my microphone on this time? I did. Still no haircut, even though I desperately need one. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you are taking care of yourself, and I hope that you are enjoying the start of summer. I know I am. Summer is my season. I love summer. Anyway, today's video is being sponsored by Quirk Books and is inspired by the recent release of This Is Not the Real World, which is the sequel to This Is Not the Jess Show. Now, today we are kind of talking about standalones. I am a standalone lover. I love the art of reading a book and it just being a one and done deal, not having to commit to a full-fledged series. Though I do love and respect series, I think more so these days I lean towards books that are standalones. So today we're going to be talking about standalones that got sequels, standalones that I felt should have stayed standalones, books that I thought were standalones that ended up being series. We're just going to explore the world of standalone books. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comments as we go over everything in today's video. So be sure to let me know all your thoughts down below in the comments. So basically why today's video is inspired by this series is because when I first read This Is Not the Jess Show, I went into it thinking it was a standalone. I thought it was going to be a one and done deal. But as I got further into the book, I was like, oh, no, this needs more. Thankfully, when I finished reading it and looked it up, I found out that it was going to in fact get a sequel. That sequel being This Is Not the Real World. In fact, I was so sure that this was going to be a standalone that I did a standalone TBR and included this in the video. That's how far off I was, but this situation kind of had me thinking about this scenario, both about books that I thought were going to be standalones that ended up being stretched out into series, or books that were like marketed as standalones but then down the line got spin-offs or sequels. I just wanted to talk about this today. So we're having a little discussion today. First up, let's talk about books that I went into thinking they were standalones but ended up being expanded into series or getting sequels. So first up, obviously we've got This Is Not the Jess Show. I thought it was a standalone. In this book we follow Jess, who is living in the 90s, and she just wants a normal life. She wants to date, she wants to not have any drama with any of her friends, and she kind of wants her parents to like chill in terms of being overprotective because they can be a little bit much. But one day, this object falls out of somebody's backpack and she's like, what the heck is that? Well, it turns out it's an iPhone, which if you know anything about the 90s, there were not iPhones back in the day. We had Tamagotchis, we had Game Boys, so she sees this iPhone, she's like, what the heck is this? That's so futuristic, and that kind of sends her into the spiral of questioning everything within her life. Going into this one and reading it thinking that it was a standalone, when I reached the end, I was like, this definitely needs more. So when I looked up and found out the fact that it had a sequel, I was very satisfied just because this is a book where I felt like it definitely needed to be expanded on. You can read this book technically and just be like done with it and just like kind of leave it as like a, oh, this is a very open-ended story. But I personally think that it kind of is the opening to a conversation, because in this book, a big thing is kind of consent. We have this girl, I'm trying not to give too much away about this book, so I'm gonna try my best here, but we have this girl who is in a situation that is very much so not okay. She is basically signed up for something that she never signed up for. And we see her kind of realizing the situation and standing up for herself and saying, hey, this is not okay. So while this one kind of opens up the gates to the conversation, I feel like we need this book to kind of explore the conversation in full. Also, I feel like we were just getting to a point with the ending of this one where our main character was just gonna like burn the place down. Obviously metaphorically, not like actually literally burning the place down. She was building up to a point where she was basically going to sabotage the situation that was happening to her, and rightfully so. Like, she is not in the wrong in terms of sabotaging everything that is happening to her in this situation, because holy heck, if you've read this book, it like really just builds up this anger within you for this situation that our main character Jess is going through. Like, I was so angry for her. I was angry on her behalf. I was shouldering some of her anger as I was reading this book. So let's talk about some other books that I thought were standalones that ended up getting sequels, and if I feel like they needed them. I honestly feel like I'm exposing myself as somebody who doesn't do that much research when I'm picking up books, because a lot of times you'll know if you look up these books that they are in fact getting a sequel. But you know what? Sometimes it's nice to just go into a book not knowing too much, not having any expectations, and then finding out that you're getting more later on. The first one here is The Golden Boys. I've talked about this book quite a bit on my channel. I think it's heavily underrated. Essentially, in this book, we are following a group of boys who are all gay. They are a very strong friend group, and they are spending the summer before their senior year away from each other, exploring their identities and exploring things that they want to do for their future. I believe this book is getting a sequel potentially like next year or the year after that, and I am skeptical about there being a second book. I think it all just kind of depends, really just depends on how it's executed, which obviously there's no way for us as the readers to like control that, but like sometimes books like this do not need sequels. This one I can see where there's potential for there to be a sequel. This is not necessarily a book where I felt like things were like left open-ended. In a lot of ways it like comes together pretty nicely, but there's obviously room to grow. The characters are still very young in this book, and it is about them kind of exploring their identities, so I think it would be cool to like maybe have a book set in college and seeing how their friendship group kind of evolves and how they stay in touch and how they grow outside of the friendship group in their college years. Essentially, this book is like what is it called? The Sisterhood of Traveling Pants. That's what I would compare it to, but with guys and they're all gay. So I think there is potential for this to be a series, because that is a series. Ooh, that just made me realize that I want an adaptation for this. I think this needs to be a movie series. Netflix, make it happen. Come on, you're making all the adaptations these days. So I'm kind of conflicted. I am excited to read the sequel and to see where our characters end up in the next book, but like, do I necessarily need that sequel? No. Is this book fine on its own? Yes. But am I gonna read the next book? Oh yes, I am. Oh yes, yes, I am. The next book is one that I read pretty recently, and that is Finlay, Donovan is Killing It. This book, I went into it just not knowing anything. I thought it was a romance. Turns out, no. It is in fact not a romance. It's a thriller murder mystery moment. Essentially, in this book, we are following Finlay, which I think I'm always saying her name incorrectly. I think it's Finlay, but I'm just gonna say Finlay. Sorry, Finlay. In this book, Finlay is a struggling author, and she goes to Panera one day to meet with her agent, and she's explaining this book to her agent, and this person overhears it and thinks that Finlay is a contract killer. So this woman comes up to her and offers her some money to take out her husband, who is just like the worst. And Finlay's like, do I do it? She dabbles in it, but there's a lot to it. That's just kind of the short in terms of what this book is about. I went into it not knowing that this was going to be a 4-book series, which in some cases frustrates me because I already have a series problem as it is, but the fact that it's going to be a 4-book series, oh my, oh my, oh my. So the fact that I have signed myself unknowingly to a 4-book series, I give up. Don't worry, the book is fine. It's fine. It's fine. Do I think this book needs a full-fledged 4-book series? I'm gonna be honest, no. Okay, so I have read the second book. I just recently audiobooked it. I'm waiting for that dang paperback to come out so it can match this one. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's a very like light-hearted mystery read. And yes, it does hint at there being more at the end of this book. You're kind of like, oh, that's interesting. I need to know what's gonna be happening there. So yes, it is nice to have this sequel, but personally, I feel like this book should have been a standalone. I feel like it did not need to be dragged out into 4 books because of the situation. Because it is more so like this girl that's getting tied up in this situation of being contracted to kill somebody after she's just telling her agent about her book. And that's kind of what makes it fun, is that it's just this coincidence thing that she gets herself wrapped up into. And I think that's where I have issues with this being a series now, because the coincidence that happens in this book is what makes it charming, and you can't really replicate that coincidence. It's gonna feel more forced to have her ending up in these like thriller murder mystery situations, and that's why I don't really want it. I did enjoy the sequel and I thought it was a lot of fun, but again, I just felt like it was being dragged out for the sake of being dragged out. So unfortunately, I don't really like the idea of this being a series, but I can't do nothing about it because it's being turned into a series. So last book that I thought was a standalone that actually had a sequel planned is Tokyo Ever After. This is a book about this girl who finds out that her dad is Japanese royalty and ends up going and spending time with him, and it's kind of following her forming a bond with her father whom she's never known, and also kind of figuring out this new life as a royal. Now, here's the deal. I think that this book does not necessarily need a sequel, but because I loved this book so much, I am more than happy to read the sequel. I am more than happy to pick it up and devour it because I love this book so much. This was one of my favorite books that I read from last year. I mean, just now realizing that this Reese's Book Club sticker is actually a sticker and not stuck on there forever. That makes me happy. Anyway, I typically don't vibe with YA romance books, so I was very shocked to find that I loved this book. It just has a very lighthearted, happy feeling running throughout it, and that's kind of what draws me to it. I just love books that just make me feel so happy. Like, who doesn't? Who doesn't want to feel the ultimate happiness when reading a book? And that's just what this book made me feel. This book definitely has room for growth growth. It ends in a way where it's like, okay, this is complete, but there are things within it where you just kind of want to know more. You want to know more about the romance that develops in here with our main character. You want to know more about the mom. You want to know more about the dad, and also the mom and dad and their connection and what went wrong there, and if there's a chance for them to like fix it. And there's more to be explored with royalty, and if our main character wants to continue living a life as a royal. Well, yes, this is perfectly fine on its own. Because I loved it so much, I want there to be a sequel. I want this to be a series of books because it just made me so happy. Is that cheating because I just loved it so much that I would love to have more? Yes. Just call me a cheater. Just call me a book cheater. The next thing that I want to talk about is books that were for sure standalones that ended up getting sequels down the line. The first one that I want to talk about is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This book was pretty popular when it first came out, but it had like a second surge of popularity thanks to TikTok. Good old book talk. In this book, in this world, you were notified on the day you were going to die, and we followed two boys who have been notified that they're going to die, and they spend their last day alive together. This one honestly makes sense that it would get sequels. If I remember correctly, this book is getting 2 more books set in this world, and while I do think this book works on its own, I think it does make sense for there to be spin-offs. Obviously, you can't have sequels where you're following the same characters because they both die at the end. The title is very telling. Obviously, you know what's happening going into this book. But one thing that I really needed more of when I read this book was the world. I felt like there were things that went left unexplained, which is fine because I feel like the world is just really a backdrop for the story. Like, the story was really about these two boys who were forming a connection on their last day alive. So obviously, I wasn't expecting immaculate, amazing world building with this book, but it was something that I was like, I wish I knew a little bit more. So I do think it'll be nice to have more books to kind of help expand the world and kind of expand your understanding for the world. I am very curious to know if it's going to be written in a similar style, because in this book, while we do have our main characters, Mateo and Rufus, we also have these other little narratives that are tying together to make a bigger story. And I don't know if the other books would work if they were written in this same style. So I'm definitely eager to see how they're written, but I will say that I am okay with this standalone being expanded into more of like a series format or like a spin-off series format. Like, I think it works. I think it's okay. I'm not too like scared about it, if you will. The next one though, I have some iffy feelings about, and that is We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I love this book so much, but I'm not the type of person where I read this book and I wanted more. I was like, yes, give me more of these characters. Explore their history. Like, no. It was a one and done deal. It was perfection on its own. When this book first came out, it was massively popular, and then again, thanks to Book Talk, it had a resurgence and it's been popular again, and so we were given a prequel called Family of Liars. I was honestly a little upset when I found out that this was happening, which makes me a hypocrite because I am definitely going to be reading this book, even though it upsets me that it's a thing that happened, because this book does not need any expansion. We do not need more than this story. This is enough. This is more than enough. This tells us all we need to know. What makes We Were Liars such a fascinating read is the way in which it's written and how you're sort of on the edge of your seat in suspense the whole time. You know something has happened, but you're in the dark the whole time, and you're leading up to this big reveal, and then the big reveal happens and you're shocked, you're shook, and then it's done. It fits perfectly in this kind of standalone format. While the family is definitely kind of an interesting aspect within this story, I don't see their history being that interesting. Like, what we learned about them in this book was enough. It gave us enough to kind of have an understanding for the family and the situation here. Like, I kind of hate to say this, but I feel like the shock factor of We Were Liars is what makes it kind of an interesting story. It builds up your emotions and leaves you gutted. A book about the family just doesn't sound like it's going to be as impactful as this book is. I'm very iffy about this book. I'm going to read it because, again, I'm a hypocrite. No, I'm not a hypocrite. I need to know. Like, I have to read this book. Because I'm so upset about it, I have to read it, you know? That's where I'm at with this. My last example for this is The Earth, My Butt, and Other Big Brown Things. This book was a standalone when it first came out, and then like 10 or so years later, I think, they came out with a sequel. The universe is expanding, and so am I. In this book, we are following a girl who is facing a lot of challenges in her life, and just kind of how everything comes to this big thing, and it kind of explodes. Like, her world kind of explodes around her in terms of like her family situation and stuff, and so it's her kind of figuring out life and picking up all the pieces and forming a normal life for herself, essentially. It's really, really great. Like, I love it. I think it kind of covers a lot of really interesting topics. I'm really on the fence here because I really enjoyed both of these books, but after having read the first book, I didn't really understand the need for a sequel. And then I read the second book. Yeah, I like this. It's a really enjoyable read, and it does explore more of the topics that are explored in this book, but is it necessary? That's where I'm kind of in the iffy territory, because I did enjoy this, but I feel like it didn't need to happen. I felt like we explored enough in this book to where we didn't need to expand on the things that we explored. It's one of those situations where it didn't need to happen, but it happened. I'm not mad that it happened, but I kind of wish it would have just stayed in standalone territory. Let me know if you guys have any more examples of books that were standalones that got sequels, because I'm kind of drawing a blank. I know there's definitely more out there. These are just like the ones that have been on my radar that I've been thinking about. Finally, today I want to talk about books that must stay standalones. Books that I do not see the need for sequels. Like, if these books get sequels, I will riot. I will rage. I will be very, very upset. I will be angry. That's what I will be. Okay, I kind of picked out a lot. There's even more than this, but I'm just gonna try to keep it short and sweet here, even though I have so many more standalones where I would probably riot if they were to get sequels. But the first one here, we have The Cost of Knowing. Now, this is one where I could see there being a sequel. In this book, we are following a guy who basically can see the future when he touches certain objects. And like, I feel like there's room there for there to be more. Does it need more? No. In this book, we go on such an emotional journey with him that I just don't see a sequel even being able to touch the first book, you know? It doesn't need to happen. We need to leave this as a standalone. Leave it be. Do not touch. The Lucky List. In this book, we are following a girl who is grieving the passing of her mother, and in order to feel closer to her mother, she is trying to complete this bucket list that her mother had created. There's just no reason, absolutely no reason for this book to get a sequel. I think it would be fine if this author put out another book and the characters in this book were like side characters or something. Like, I'd be okay with that. I'd be down for that. That's fine. Put them in the same universe. Yes, I'm here for it. A sequel? No. You Should See Me in a Crown. I love this book. I love these characters. Do I need a sequel? Absolutely not. This book ties together beautifully. Again, I'd be okay if this author released a book and the characters in this book were side characters. Have at it with that. The Sun Is Also a Star. No. Nicola Yoon is one of the best standalone writers out there. That doesn't mean she can't write a series. Like, if she wants to write a series, have at it. Just don't mess with your standalones, please, because they're perfection. I swear to God, if this ever happens, if they ever attempt to write a sequel for this book, I will literally start a petition for it to not happen, okay? That's a threat. That is a threat. That's a threat. Perks of Being a Wallflower. I think there was at one point in time when I was like, I want more from these characters. I want to see them all grown up. And then I grew up a little bit and I realized this book is perfect. It's probably the closest book to perfect I will ever read, in my opinion. I love this book so much. My copy's a little bent, but like, we don't need to go back here. We don't need to go back here. This story is beautiful on its own. Do not mess with the beautifulness. That's it for today's video. That's it for today's discussion. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I feel like I was kind of all over the place, but I tried my best. I want to hear from you guys down below in the comments. What are your thoughts on this? What are books that you went into thinking they were standalones but ended up being series? What's a book that was for sure a standalone when it came out that got a sequel that you're a little bit like iffy about? And what are some books that you think should remain standalones? Let me know all your thoughts down below in the comments. Again, thank you to Quirk Books for sponsoring today's video. This is not the Jess Show, and this is not The Real World or in stores now. This is not The Real World is actually Booksplosion's book of the month, so if you want to join us, I will leave more information for that down below in the description. If you like this video, be sure to go and hit that like button. If you want to see more bookish content from me, be sure to go and hit subscribe or go and hit that bell icon and you'll be notified every time I post new videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope your day is bright, that tomorrow is brighter. Keep reading what your heart desires, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye-oh! I hope that you guys are doing swell. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're, yeah, bye. Okay. Divorce, and she is essentially, not me saying essentially.